Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For more than 25 years, Reach the World has sparked student curiosity, bringing real-world adventure, fresh perspectives, and career pathways into K-12 classrooms through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and today we're back for the next chapter of Reach the World's Explorer program virtual exchange titled The Monsters of Hungary. Joining us live again all the way from Budapest, Hungary is our Explorer guide for this program, Fulbright U.S. student program researcher Kyla Jernigan. Based on Kyla's research and experiences in Hungary, she's going to show us today how to create our own monsters. It's all been building to this. Quick question first. Have you read Kyla's first virtual exchange articles? Make sure you're visiting her Monsters of Hungary virtual exchange homepage for the very latest updates. I have shared that direct link in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen for those of you who are joining us by YouTube. And to the classrooms and students who are joining us on camera or via YouTube today, hello. And please be thinking about your questions for Kyla as we go today. If you're feeling brave and want to ask her a question, you'll have that opportunity today. And I know some of you have some things you want to show her, so that's very exciting. Let's get to the main show, though. I'm very excited to welcome to the screen, all the way from Budapest, Hungary, Fulbright U.S. student program scholar and researcher Kyla Jernigan. Let's get her on the screen. Hi, Kyla.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Excellent. It is nice to see you. Before we get talking about monsters today, when we were talking before this week started here, you pronounced the word Budapest in a way that was very interesting to me. And can you tell me how somebody in Budapest would pronounce Budapest? And am I saying it wrong?
So I've heard two different pronunciations. Like there's Budapest and Budapest. And I think I always forget which one I actually say until I say it. And I'm pretty sure Budapest. They don't pronounce the T. And so there's a couple words that are kind of different. So there's the Buda side and the Pest side. Yeah, I think it's just, is that how I always get mixed up of which version. So growing up, I'm originally from Florida, where there's not really an accent or special pronunciation of anything. But then when I've moved to Tennessee, there's a huge accent shift. And so I've always found it really interesting which versions I pick up versus which ones I keep in Florida.
Very interesting. Just for our students who are joining, if you really want to impress everybody around you, say Budapest. Right at the end, it'll make you sound like you really know what you're talking about, and that's a good thing. That's what we want. So we're back with Kyla today. The first time we got to talk with you live, you were telling us about your experiences at a really cool festival where you got to see some of these folkloric traditions of Hungary in action in the form of an amazing festival. Who can forget that? We saw those cool monsters, the masks. You got to try one on, and they were causing all kinds of mischief in the streets. And that was really fun. And we previewed on that call that this time we'd be coming back and sort of looking at what you're doing in your studio, in your workshop, and helping students start to think about designing monsters of their own. So you had submitted a Reach the World album with some examples of your students' work. And I'm just going to bring those pictures up and turn it over to you. And you can tell me what your students are up to.
Yeah, so in this workshop, I'm working with this high school, and it's an art design based high school. So they're working on illustrations and fashion design, costume design, and this is sort of their extra class that they've had. And I was able to partner with the teacher, and in this class, we are designing their very own monsters. The concept is to take their fears, whether it's a very physical fear or a concrete fear, is like a fear of an animal or fear of something visual, versus a fear that's more abstract. So the collage right here is a fear of someone's describing what it would feel like to die alone. Like she was very honest with some of her really big fears. So in this class, they started off by really brainstorming and thinking about what they're afraid of, and then visually collaging those ideas to sort of pull references for things that they could later use to make something monstrous. So in the first photo, you can see them kind of sketching and brainstorming, and then that's the next photo is the collage that they've built. And now you can kind of see some of the sketches. And then, so the girl whose idea is to really explore the kind of concept of dying alone. She ended up kind of pulling ideas of like, well, what if I never got to have a wedding? Like, what if I had this wedding dress sitting aside? And she's now created this monster, this creature that is like almost a possessed doll, a doll who was never loved by children, who is like dressed up in this wedding dress. We're gonna do some like porcelain makeup. And she got really fortunate that one of the other students in the class actually had a dress a white dress she made that she was willing to give to her to turn into this sort of wedding dress monster creature. So you can see the dress before we started doing any work to it. And then there she's painting it. And then as a bit of a fun element, I'm going to quickly pull it out. I have the dress right here with me. Let me see. I think I can get my camera wider. Nope, that's comments.
Here, I'll make it so your screen's a little bigger here.
Okay, and then I can go to widescreen. That's what I wanted to do because this is rather big. So now she has taken this dress and not only has she painted it, but she started adding tulle to it so that it has some of this layered kind of ripped effect to the dress. So I wanted to be able to show you guys some pieces, even though I'm not able to have this live stream in the workshop itself. So I'm very impressed with just some of the texture that she's adding to kind of add to that very distressed, very worn out look of something that's never been touched, maybe left in the attic. I'm very excited to see what else she does with this monster design. And here you can see some more student sketching. This student sort of exploring, the idea of illness and what those sensations would be like. So you can kind of see in some of those sketches, like she's drawing out lungs and, what would they be like if they were, shaped differently, or how to kind of incorporate shape and line. A lot of times with these students, they're really having to focus on some really like big concepts when it comes to art. But even for me, like I enjoy just using collages to sort of translate ideas and bring together like, well, these are a bunch of things that I'm drawing reference from, and now let me make my own design from. And then with this student, one of the pieces she's creating for her monster is she is making a spine out of fabric. And so she's used this really unique stitching method where she's pulled together the fabric in a way that it looks like a spine, like the spine of a human being. So I actually have that piece with me right now, and I'm going to show you an inside look of the back. So you can see this is the back, and this is how she's like pulled together each layer of the fabric. So that way the front looks like a spinal cord. And the other cool element of this is she's now started to add this felting material along with some latex to create a very like vein structure. So you can see how like even when the thread starts pulling outwards, it starts looking like the smaller veins underneath the skin. So I'm very excited to see where else she goes with this. And I'm just very impressed with how well the stitching actually pulled together. Apparently this is something they do at the school, is they practice a lot of like intricate stitch work and pattern making.
When I saw that for the first time, that one gave me the shivers. Like that
Oh
was
no,
a
you've
very
gone mute again.
Oh no.
I don't know if it's just for me or not.
Go ahead.
I know.
Go ahead.
Okay, keep going. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Well, the other elements that I have with me are one of the hands that the one of my students made. I believe this is one of the hands I actually used. I feel like the size is relatively the same. So what she's doing for this is she's having a creature that's supposed to represent the fear of fear. So she has a monster that has these hands kind of grabbing the face all around, and so she's making these hands ahead of time to then add to the costume. So one thing she's doing is taking my hand or her hand and using either a glove or saran wrap, and then using tape to build a structure, and then filling it with cotton or paper. And that way she kind of has this like slightly posable hand that she can, then use to create the face mask structure. So, and then this one is for this piece where one of us students is exploring her fear of falling. And so she's pulled these visuals, the kind of vertigo effect and looking downwards, and she's going to create this creature that has these almost like shards of, what the visuals of vertigo look like, as well as this. I will warn students, it's a little gruesome. She's creating an effect of, something smashing against the ground. So the face of the creature is going to be using this sort of mask that she's made, where it looks like it's almost like part asphalt, and sort of broken. She's added all these different effects to it and painted it. So I'm very excited to see what it looks like. We're trying to figure out how it's going to fit on someone's head, for the costume part of things. And that's one of the problems when you have to do with the design, when you're designing and building costumes, is you actually have to think not just about how things look, but how they'll actually work on the performer or the model. So in this case, I'm a little worried that this might be a little small, but we'll figure it out. And those are the pieces that I was able to borrow from the students at the workshop that I was able to bring to my apartment. Some are still there. They're just a little bit too big for me to carry.
Can you hear me?
I cannot.
Ah,
I don't know. I can always leave and come back on again. I'm assuming everyone else can hear you.
testing, testing. For Miss Ponsard students or any of the students who are watching, can you just confirm through the chat or through
There you go. You're back for me.
Oh, hey, great.
Never mind, you're gone. I don't know what happened. I don't know if that's so strange.
Testing, 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 testing.
Anyway. But yeah, there's a couple other students working on their designs, kind of pulling together, a collage, and then they're able to make sketches from that, and then take the sketches and turn it into a creature. Yeah, this one I believe is talking about like the kind of the passage of time, but also she was really interested in the fear. There's apparently this fear, I've never heard of it until recently. I've heard it twice now, of like the fear of tiny holes. And so creatures such as like dried out coral, or there's a couple sea creatures out there that sort of have this porous texture to them. And so the student is wanting to explore that.
Kyla, testing, testing. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, good. We're back.
We're back. Okay, and then this is possibly one of my favorites. She is doing this sort of fear of being trapped or being contained, and one of the ways she's representing, or when she talked about that, we talked about possibly doing like a straitjacket. Well, then I offered, well, what if the straitjacket is almost made of the creature's skin? And so she's been able to take latex and fabric and pull it together to sort of create this almost like mummification. And then the back, we're going to make the arm. So when you're wearing a straitjacket, normally your hands go up and around. And so she's making it as if the hands are elongated down the back, and that's what's holding it down itself. So very gruesome, very interesting. Again, another one we're having to think about sort of the effects on the model wearing it. So we're talking about possibly putting the model in a wheelchair, or possibly just allowing her to sit the whole time, since she probably won't be able to move very well within the costume itself.
As your students are exploring these ideas, it sounds like they start with sort of some fears that they want to explore, and then
Yes.
what that becomes, the physical representation of that changes over time. Do you see what's the process like? Does the on like almost a daily basis, is the idea changing a little bit as they explore?
Yeah. I think the biggest, like, a lot of times I want the students to start off as like open-minded to any possibility and kind of letting anything be possible. But then you do have to start thinking about the real constraints of design work. Can we build it? Can we do it within the time frame that we have? Will it fit someone? Will they be able to move? If not, how do we work around that? Are these supplies that we're able to afford? So kind of asking these questions, every time we meet, and checking back in. We're right now at the point where we have a month left, and I'm going to be asking them, okay, what do you need to complete? What do you have left? Where are you most concerned? What can we simplify? What can we, make a little bit easier? So that's kind of like the design, the actual product part. But even with the designs, a lot of times you don't go with it's not smart to go with your first idea. You know, maybe you give I saw a couple students do complete redesigns where they would pick, several different fears and draw them out and collage them, and then maybe go with one that they didn't really originally think about or combine two of them. You never know what sort of like rabbit hole you're going to think about. So one thing I'm really interested in is like mind mapping. You start with a fear, you start with a topic or an idea, and you connect it to other things. And those things maybe are your visuals. And then you go from those visuals to maybe something that's maybe in a film or movie. I think one of the students, I'm trying to remember which one she was. So she was talking about she wanted to explore the fear of fear. And the teacher in the class that I'm working with was like, oh, I don't know how you would do that. And I said, well, maybe you look at Scarecrow from the Batman universe. He's a character who represents the idea of fear and what does that mean and how does it affect people? And he's a scarecrow. So maybe you don't use a scarecrow, but you could see what other things come from that idea and kind of go down the rabbit hole.
Very interesting. These visual planning boards to me are like very I don't know, you can't always put your finger on what is creepy about them, but they definitely represent fears.
Yeah, this one is possibly, I really enjoyed watching her kind of go through her process. So with the fears, especially like I love the hand visual that she had, but she also, the circles, the spiral effect is from a real creature. It's called the lamprey. They're this sort of aquatic creature with all these little teeth around its face to make this sort of like suction cup effect. And so she wanted to really kind of explore that creature and how that worked as well.
Very interesting. And we've got one last slide here.
Yeah, so this is where she's making one of her hands. And like I said, like this is one of the ones that we made later that I let her use my hands as part of the model, since she wanted to make sure she had both left and right hands. So she couldn't get her own left hand. I was like, here, have mine.
Great teamwork.
Yes.
So we've gone through a couple examples of student processes. They're brainstorming, coming up with ideas, thinking about materials, thinking about ways that they can represent the fears that they're trying to depict through a costume. We have joining us Ms. Ponsart's class backstage, and I want to bring them on in just a moment because they have been going through this process a little bit too in the midst of spring testing. Never a ton of fun in the spring to do testing, but had a chance to do some creative monster generating themselves. So I'm going to bring them on so we can say hello. Hi, Ms. Ponsart's class.
Hello.
Hi, how are you all doing today?
We're great.
Great. We have, I know you missed just the beginning where we were talking about some of Kyla's students' monsters, but do we have a couple of brave students who want to share what their monster ideas were with Kyla, and she can give you a little bit of feedback on your idea?
So I shared some of our monster pictures. So if you guys want to talk about your monsters, Aiden, go right ahead. So if you want to show her your pictures, I have them. But if you want to just talk about them, you can. So you want to go up, Aiden? Yeah. All right, no, go sit in the chair or stand right in front of it so she can see you. Okay.
Hi.
Hi. So mine is like blue and it has a bunch of sharp teeth. That's just all.
No, but I think sometimes when you pick a color palette, that can help you like pull other ideas of what else is blue and sort of ominous. Maybe looking at like deep sea creatures. One of the earlier references I had in a workshop was someone pulled like blue whales that she was always like, she thought how big they are and how scary they were. So maybe exploring something involved with the ocean, trying to think of other things that involve like that blue color. But the teeth are also really fun.
So yeah.
How's it on? Go ahead. Yeah, I don't. Should be at the top.
I would love to see your pictures. It always helps me to like visualize where you guys are coming from with your creature designs.
You don't have to.
Kyla, while she's coming up, do you have like, something comes to my mind as my fear if I were going to make a monster. Like, do you have a fear that you have used before?
Yeah, so For me, one creature I would really love to explore that I'm sort of have this long-standing fear of is alligators. I grew up in Florida, always have these nightmares of swimming in the water and looking down and the whole ground being covered in alligators. So I'd love to really create a creature design that is pulled from that idea of something lurking in the water, or something, you know, waiting to drag me down. Yeah, and there's a lot of cool visuals for that. If you ever look up alligators at night, their eyes glow red.
Creepy. All right, I'll turn it over to our student who's ready to show you her idea.
Awesome.
So the coloring kind of failed. This is my monster.
I don't see that as a failure.
The
You
teeth.
got some really cool effects with like almost like the yellow and purple. Like, is that yellow and purple I can see on there?
Yeah.
It kind of looks like bruising, which is something I do a lot with my special effects makeup. No, I think that's really cool.
Can you tell us a little bit about your monster and what sort of inspired you?
So
So how'd you get started on it, Amelia?
Randomly I just found a weird little dot on my paper and I kind of made it bigger. Then I made it an eye. The eye looked really creepy, so I made another. Then I kept failing at the mouth, so I just decided to make it really big and creepy. Then I just kind of expanded on that and made it a whole person, and then it kind of turned out a little demonic, but that's fine.
It's a monster. I mean, demons are a part of that element. They're under my classification of monsters.
It seems like maybe a next step, Kyla, and you can expand on this, would be like you've created a visual of something that's a little creepy to you, and maybe you don't quite know why, but making up a story for that monster. What's its deal?
Exactly. So now there's two ways of design in my mind, or there's many, but the two ways I think about monsters is you start off with a visual and you create a story, or you create a story and then you make a visual. So you've made a visual. Now it's your turn to think about this creature and think about, how did it come to be? Was it an experiment? Was it born this way? What does it eat? How does it hunt? Where does it live? So start thinking about sort of the speculative biology of your creature, its history. I think you have a lot of fun things to explore with that. There's a lot of folk tales that involve creatures that are kind of smiling or have these sort of large, creepy mouths. Reminds me of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you so much
drawing.
for sharing.
Yeah, that's very brave of you. It takes a lot to get up and share your creative output with people like this.
All right, we have another one. Nolan's going to share his.
Excellent.
I made this. It kind of is like a tree guy.
Wow.
He hides in the trees, kind of. I don't know.
No, I really like that. So do you have an idea of maybe what sort of forest he's hunting in or haunting in?
Like an oak forest, kind of, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really cool, you have an environment that your creature is based in. And so maybe exploring again, how does it interact with that environment? What happens when people go into the woods? I see that has a whip. That's a very cool weapon to kind of give it.
Yeah, yeah. That's really it.
No, it's really cool.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Oh, good. We got another sharer, or at least maybe two other sharers. Excellent. Kyla, I was going to say, while our next students come up, my fear when I was growing up was we had this big forest behind our house, and I was always afraid of what would be coming out of the forest. So that last one really spoke to me, because woods and forests are kind of scary, especially things that are in the trees.
And there's something that has been, people have been scared of throughout history. And that's why there's always that creature of, the story of the witch in the woods. Don't go in the woods.
Yeah. All right. Great. Another student.
All right. So, this is my image.
Wow. I really love your use of color with that.
Yeah, he's kind of based on sort of a demon lord beast thing. And this little speck with words here, it says blue whale for size comparison. So
I
he's
really love that you put a size reference in there. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's-
Yeah, so basically he kind of just like flies around in the universe and like destroys planets.
Ooh,
He kind of like eats planets like Galactus.
that's exactly who I was thinking of.
And he has a pet sandworm.
Ooh,
And he's got like 7 eyes. So yeah.
no, I really like that. I love that you put in a size reference. That's something that when I think about creature design and again, basing it in biology, having references for how big it is or how it interacts with things. So the fact that it has a, pet or symbiotic relationship with a sandworm. Also, it's really cool to see someone do something kind of space related. A lot of, we have a lot of monsters that are alien based.
Aiden wants to, he already talked to you about it, but he wants to show you his now, so go
Oh,
show.
please, yes.
So, he found his picture, so he wants to show it to you. You wanna go next, Aiden? Okay.
So this is what it is.
Oh, wow. No, I like again, like you got a good color reference for that. I do think I've seen something similar to that. Is that are you drawing inspiration from something?
I don't know.
Well, I think it's something. I think sometimes it's interesting how even when we're pulling from our imaginations, there ends up being a lot of similarities to creatures that are actually out there. So sometimes you can see that maybe your fear or the things that you're afraid of are common connectors to other people around the world. Like I think it's so interesting how so many cultures have dragons as a folktale character. It makes me wonder, like, okay, what is it about dragons that everyone's so connected to? So yeah, I really like that. Thank you for showing me. I'm glad you were able to find it.
All right, I got one more, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. So Janie's gonna share his.
Awesome. So what's the story behind your monster?
It's a lemon monster. It punched a hole in the sun, and it's super tall.
Does it have something against the sun?
Yeah, it doesn't like how bright it is.
I mean, that's a motivation. Some creatures are nocturnal. So if they were able to create a way where they were able to be out in the daylight more or, daytime more, like that's a way that like a creature is interacting with the environment in a negative way. How do you know how your creature came to be? Is it an experimentation? Is it biological?
I don't know.
He doesn't know yet.
Maybe that's something to explore.
So that's my next question. So now that we started with our monster, like I would say this is our like kind of our rough draft. Would you come up with a story with it, or what would you do next with this? Jamie, you can move if you want to.
Okay. So, you guys, again, like I said, you kind of have 2 different ways of going about it. Either one way is to really focus on the visuals and sort of nail down the design you want and get more detailed or, try different layouts, try different, how does it look with 4 arms? How does it look with 2 arms? So there's the visual design aspect, or you can go into more the narrative and the story side of things. So think about, okay, maybe I want to start explaining, where does it come from, or how does it work, or is it a pack animal? And as you're thinking about the story, it helps you come up with more design elements. So if you think about it being a pack animal, okay, well, what does the male version of this creature look like versus the female version of this creature look like? Both ways of doing the visual side or doing the story side. Either way works. It really just depends on who you are as a designer. I think for me, I really enjoy the sort of visual side of things and kind of giving myself multiple different options to pursue and then pursuing the story. But sometimes the story comes first.
And how long is like your workshop with the ones you're working with? Like from beginning to end, what's that timeline like?
Right. So for me, this workshop has started at the beginning of February, and we were only able to meet at first for only once a week for 1 hour. Thankfully, we've been able to move for a little bit longer, and now we're able to do 3 hours. But we're working from February to the end of April, and then in May is when we're going to have our exhibition. But really, design can take anywhere between a few days to, a couple of weeks. In theater, my experience is normally like, either anywhere between 1 to 3 months is kind of how my view of like, I take the first month to really, first few weeks of that month to really design and prototype and ask other people for their, criticisms or, reflection and encouragement, and then move into the like, okay, well, now I need to buy stuff. Now I need to actually plan on how to make this happen. And that's kind of where it goes. Like, you can take longer, or you can have to really speed up the process. I had one show where I needed to have my designs in before we even had a cast, because it was a soccer play, and the director wanted them to practice in their soccer shoes immediately. So I had them actually ask everyone who got called back for the show, who came to the second round of auditions, to give me their shoe size so that the moment we had a cast list, I could place an order for shoes.
Well, Ms. Ponter's class, thank you so much, especially those brave students who shared their monster designs.
Everyone's sound's cut out again. I don't know if I heard that last question.
Can I see a thumbs up from Ms. Ponter's class if you can hear me? Okay, cool.
Y'all can hear him. I can't hear him, and I don't know. Don't know if I can hear anyone in the classroom.
Can you hear?
I can hear you.
Okay, Tim's saying thank you.
I just wanted to say, to Ms. Ponter's class and to others who are watching, like, your ideas are fabulous. Thank you to those brave few who shared their ideas with Kyla here. I hope you'll join us in a couple of weeks when we're going to reconnect. And maybe you can take some of the advice that Kyla gave you today and you can create a story for your monster. Or you can, Kyla, it struck me that you're working with a limitation that the idea that your students are coming up with have to be something they can produce, right? Like, it's fine to produce a monster who can, like, punch a hole in the sun, but you can't make that for the stage, right? There might be limitations when you have something, you have to produce something for the stage or for a movie. I can't wait to see the next iteration of Ms. Pontart's students' monsters, and I want to thank you all very, very much for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It really means a lot to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it's a big deal.
I'm going to bring on a question from another. Here. There you go. Miss Lake is asking, do you make monsters yourself with your students?
I have not made a monster with the students yet. I have been brainstorming for some of the other workshops I've given, but between the day-to-day life in Budapest and then also my own lack of space and resources right now, I've been wanting to make sure I prioritize getting their monsters made first and foremost.
Okay, very, very good. Can you hear me?
I cannot. I really don't know what's going on. I could hear them.
So
I could like almost hear you at points.
I'm going to try one other thing. Is this working? Testing. No. Okay.
And randomly it just started up again earlier, so I don't know what's going on.
We're working through some sound things right now.
You want me to leave and come back? Okay.
So while Kyla is going away, and she'll come back in just a second, I want to talk about where we want to go with this, especially for our classrooms who are watching on YouTube. There's more that we want to do with this. You've learned some really cool things from Kyla about how you think about planning a monster, how you can visualize the monster, the things that scare you, and put it on paper as a plan. You can come up with a story about a creature and then decide what it's going to look like. In the next weeks, before we reconnect for the last time with Kyla from Budapest, please take your monster ideas a little bit further, and we'll do another round of what we just did with Kyla from Budapest. She can show us some of the finished products from her students in Budapest and see where those cool costume designs ended up. And then you can show her some of the monster ideas that you've come up with too. And I think we're all really interested to know if they have stories, if they have identifiable things that you're afraid of and you represented in the form of the monster that you came up with. So I hope maybe Kyla's back. Can you hear me?
I am back and I can hear you.
Yes. All right, cool. So I was just going over our project, what we want our students to do sort of between now and the next time we get together. Can you just one more time walk us through a process? If you are, have been thinking about all the things you've been talking about, Kyla, how could someone who wants to try their hand at designing their own monster, what are some steps they could take before the next time we meet?
Okay, well, very similar process to what the classroom is showing us is kind of brainstorming, or something that we worked on is the first step is brainstorming fears, like brainstorming ideas, something that scares you, kind of using that as a jumping off point. And then my next step is normally creating a collage. So pulling together visuals, pulling together, if it's a animal that I'm scared of, pictures of that animal doing, looking scary, or how have people drawn that in sort of a like a horror film way. Is there a horror film that there is this sort of, theme or creature? Looking into those movies and games and books. One of my favorite ways to do this or easiest ways to do this is to go on Pinterest and type in like alligators creepy, and it pulls up images of alligators looking creepy. And that way I kind of have like, okay, I'm going to start building that. And then I notice, okay, what is it about it that makes the alligator creepy? Is it the scales? Is it the claws? Is it the teeth? And maybe I pull those elements, and then maybe I go to a different animal. I'm kind of like, if you're afraid of birds, well, what is it about that makes you afraid of birds? Is it the beaks? Is it the feathers? Is it the fact that if there's a flock of them and they surround you? So maybe you push those two animals together to create a monster. And so that's, one way of approaching it, sort of a visual method, or again, maybe it's exploring more of a story and a fear. So I would say there's two different ways to approach this, and neither are wrong. But either way, you end in a collage. So either a collage based in sort of storytelling, abstract ideas, such as like the fear of falling, or, the fear of dying alone, which is what my students are doing. Or you kind of go the more visual sort of monster mash way, is that what I like to call it, where you put together two animals and you turn it into a creature, or you pull the visuals of what about it makes it scary. And then the next step would be taking those visual collages and turning them into sort of first sketch drafts. A monster you could pitch to someone as, this is going to be my monster for my horror film. And it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but it's just something to get the idea across. So that idea combined with your collage is sort of your way of communicating your fear and your ideas to your team.
Excellent. And everyone who's following us is in a school. For many years in school, you've read American fairy tales, not necessarily American fairy tales, world fairy tales and folklore. Kyla cited Hansel and Gretel before about reasons some people might be afraid of the woods. Like, you can look to the things that you've read and the things you watch on TV are great inspiration. You, Kyla, before for one of the student designs had sort of made the reference, like, this reminds me of something else. And you may not always be able to put your finger on what it was that you saw one time while you were watching TV after school or something. But those images, I feel like, that really scare you or resonate with you, stick with you in a weird way in your brain. And when you start thinking like this and putting your ideas on paper, sometimes they all come together in a weird and exciting way into a totally new creature.
Exactly. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with for the next live stream.
Awesome. Well, we're going to leave it there for today. Students, you've got your assignment. I want to see, and Kyla wants to see, your wildest, most inventive, creative monsters. And if you are ready and able, we want to hear its backstory. What's its motivation? Where was it born? What's its deal? Give us something completely original. We want to see your ideas, and can't wait to reconnect with you in a couple weeks and see what you come up with. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Kyla, thank you so much for joining us from Budapest.
Thank you so much.
Of course, yes. And we are going to be back with Kyla again in a couple weeks to look at some of those designs that you make. So good luck, everyone. Can't wait to see what you do, and have a great week. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.